Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Yolanda Melody. In this video I want to talk about fake spirituality and the pitfalls. Over the past few years, spirituality has become almost like a popular aesthetic. So many people are jumping on the bandwagon, and while I do believe that that's great, it's also introduced a load of issues and misconceptions, and I feel like if people don't talk about it, what will happen is people will eventually turn away from spirituality because it's been represented in so many bad ways. To me, spirituality is all about awareness, understanding that the material world is not the be-all and end-all. There are other things going on. It's about reconnecting with your intuition. It's also about self-development, understanding, seeking knowledge, and also a major thing is introspection. Being able to master your own mind and not be so quick to react to things, to be able to sit back, observe, and gain control over yourself. That's what spirituality means to me. But like with so many things in this world, spirituality has become an aesthetic. People like to make judgments based on how someone looks. For example, if I were to present myself with a lab coat and a stethoscope around my neck, many people would presume that I am a doctor. And you know how I know this? Because I've seen it, okay? I've seen how people make presumptions based on how someone chooses to represent themselves visually. There are many successful spiritual teachers out there that have a spiritual aesthetic, but just because they present themselves wearing a floaty top and crystals around their neck does not necessarily mean that they are spiritually advanced, or even that they have good intentions. Now, no shade to anyone who has that aesthetic, who likes that aesthetic, but the point that I'm making is that because it is so easy to manipulate people based on just changing the way you look, that's a problem. Some of the most spiritual people that I know just have their own style. They don't have a specific look about them, but you can tell that they're spiritual because of their energy, their level of understanding. But so many people either aren't tuned into their own intuition, or they're maybe just not listening to it. So that's the first thing, is spirituality is not an aesthetic. The next thing I want to talk about is toxic positivity. When people first learn about the law of vibration and raising their frequency, manifestation, all of that stuff, most of the time people tend to go into the realm of pushing themselves to become delusional and not wanting to look at anything negative, not wanting to acknowledge any problems that might be screaming in their face. And the thing to bear in mind here is we are put on this earth to experience a full spectrum of emotions. We're here to grow, to get better, and you can't grow without adversity. And you won't become stronger if you're not able to tackle problems head on. If toxic positivity worked, then it would have already changed the world by then, because so many people who aren't spiritual are toxically positive. So many people are not willing to actually look at real life problems. They bury themselves in anything that will distract them, that will make them feel happy in the moment. How many people do you meet that you speak to and you say, hey, how are you? And they say, yeah, I'm great. Life's great, work's great. And you know that they're lying. But people perpetually bullshit each other all the time, pretending like things are great when they're actually not. If you're not willing to face problems, the problems won't get fixed. And what will happen is they'll just fester in the background until one day it just goes boom. That's a pattern that I see and have seen throughout my life. Do you ever notice that if something has been festering for a while, if something's been bothering you, the tension of trying to ignore it actually feels worse and worse as time goes on. And then maybe you'll hit a breaking point where suddenly you have an emotional outburst or you'll cry or something like that. And then suddenly you feel a lot better. You feel relief. This is the danger of toxic positivity. It teaches you to suppress. A lot of people will use spirituality as a form of escapism. I've done this myself, that's why I'm speaking about it, because I know how that feels. I went so heavy into the New Age movement. Thankfully, I wasn't doing YouTube back then. Otherwise, I would have made a lot of embarrassing videos. I was trying to escape from all of the negative emotions that I just didn't want to face back then. And what I found was it progressively made me feel worse and worse, and I became so fearful of negativity. I would avoid anything potentially negative because I was so scared that it would ruin my vibration or ruin my manifestations, and I'd go into like a negative spiral. Nowadays, I tend to just go with the flow, and things have been so much nicer that way. Things come and go in waves. There are ups, there are downs, but regardless, they are an experience and an opportunity to learn. And I always find that whatever problems you end up facing, once you've overcome them, you feel so much more resilient and so much stronger. If you have the expectation that every single moment needs to be exciting, happy, and that the goal is that your life should just become like a holiday 24/7, first off, it would become very boring. Second off, you're gonna get disappointed. Every time something bad happens, it will become amplified because your expectation is that everything must be really happy all the time. So what I do, instead of looking at it like that, I look at my life like a movie. A really, really, really long movie that just goes on and on and on. And sometimes the genre changes. Right now, I would probably say that my life is like a dark comedy. It has been a psychological thriller for most of it, but I've had little tiny parts where it's been like a chick flick. That's not really lasted very long. If you look at life like a movie, you understand that the movie is completely dull and uninteresting without variety. You can imagine that you are the main character and the director, and every now and then a co-writer puts something into the script and you're like, no, I don't want that. And everyone's like, well, we've started the scene now, like we've got to go to the end, we've got to complete the sequence now. And you're like, oh, for God's sake. But then after you've played out that scene, you look back and you think, yeah, actually, that makes sense. We'll keep that in the final cut because it's good for the character development. What people often forget when they get into spirituality, first off, is that we are here to experience being a human, living a human life. In reality, we're all spiritual. It's just some people hone in on it more than other people. Some people shun their spirituality. They lock off from it completely for whatever reason. But unless the NPC theory is actually correct, we do all have a soul and we are not our body. We are a spirit inside a body. So another thing is, I want to dispel the illusion that a spiritually advanced person should never show emotion or have a personality. There are so many teachers out there, and I'm talking about the big players, right? So like the Dalai Lama, for example. Loads of people would look at him and think, oh, he's such a spiritually advanced person. You know, he's got the spiritual outfit. Every time he talks, it's very calm, very emotionless, kind of has this holier than thou kind of persona, and kind of makes you feel shit about yourself, really, because he and so many others have this persona that they're above you. They just know so much more than you do. And what I feel like this does, because the big players have this holier than thou image, it then sets the standard to anybody else who wants to talk about spirituality publicly. There is now an archetype of what a spiritual teacher or spiritual person is supposed to look like, is supposed to sound like, and anyone who doesn't sound like that is obviously not enlightened. So what you then see happening is people are deleting their personality because otherwise they're scared that people won't listen to their message. they won't take them seriously. Therefore, if people don't take them seriously, they won't learn because they won't listen. And I, myself, have fallen victim to this. I feel like for a long time, because I wanted to be taken seriously, I wasn't as humorous or as expressive as I usually am. But I am really, really expressive. In real life, I am really, really theatrical. That's always been my personality. And I've got to the point right now where I'm like, you know what? If people are going to make judgments, if people aren't going to take me seriously, that's fine. Listen to the Dalai Lama. I'm always baffled at how the mainstream always manages to turn something positive into something negative. They seem to be able to invert everything. Another thing that's really quite bizarre is that spiritual development, it says it in the name really, it's about developing your spirit. Really, spirituality has nothing to do with physical objects. But what I find is really bizarre is that spirituality, when you first get into it, I noticed this anyway, I ended up buying so many things that are supposedly spiritual. I used to buy so many crystals, and there's always something else that you need to buy because it's going to raise your frequency or do this or do that. When really the object should be to be able to do all of these things without needing to utilize objects. I'm not dissing anyone for buying spiritual things. Like I said, I bought so many crystals, but what was really strange was that it became an obsession. I had a crystal for every single emotion that I wanted to feel or emotion that I didn't want to feel. I'd wear tourmaline for protection if I was going somewhere like work, for example, and there was a colleague that I didn't get along with. I'd wear opalite if I felt anxious. I used to wear carnelian in order to feel confident. And when you first start off doing this, you feel like you've hacked some kind of code, like, oh, I can manipulate energy by wearing different types of crystals and they will change my entire vibration. But what you end up doing is you end up leaning on that crystal, an object, instead of going in and learning to alchemize energy yourself. I know it sounds like a very weird analogy, but bear with me here. You have to think, if I was put into a padded cell and everything was taken away from you, all your physical objects that you own, and it's just you in a room, would you be able to alchemize energy and master your own mind in that situation? The reason why I say this is because someone could heavily rely on all of these objects to achieve whatever, but what happens if you don't have that object? What happens if you lose it? I've been thinking a lot recently about the concept of witchcraft and why do people get into witchcraft and why do some people believe that it's evil? Now I'm just going to preface this by saying, if you're new here, I don't do witchcraft. I don't judge anyone who does witchcraft, but I personally believe that if you don't fully understand what you're messing with, you shouldn't be doing it. I've said this in previous videos, so many people participate in such dangerous practices and they have absolutely no idea what they're messing with. But I thought to myself, with a lot of witchcraft, it's basically manifestation, but with the use of tools. Most people who are doing witchcraft are trying to manifest something. Let's say, for example, a witch will do a spell to gain money. Now, I've said in previous videos, there is nothing wrong with wanting to be financially free. But the only difference with trying to manifest wealth by using the power of your mind versus doing witchcraft and doing a spell to obtain wealth is that doing spells bypasses the need for you to alchemize your own energy. I believe that witchcraft is kind of hacking the system, and I do believe that somewhere down the line you will have to pay for it in some way. Because if you think about it, you can have someone who has no spiritual advancement whatsoever. You could have any person do a spell. And I personally believe that these spells will work regardless of where you're at on a spiritual level. Whereas what I believe God wants us to do is that we reap what we sow. I don't believe that by nature, by using the law of attraction, I don't believe that anything will come to you if you are not ready for it. But say for example, if there's blocks in the way, or say for example, there's certain challenges that you need to overcome before you obtain this thing that you're trying to manifest. If you're using the power of your mind, you're developing yourself to prepare mentally for those blessings. I'll give you a quick example when it comes to money again. I always use money as an example because it's so easy to convey the message. So you got two people. One person hasn't done the work spiritually. They have actually got a lot of negative belief systems towards money. They don't know how to handle money, but they decide to do witchcraft and they do a spell to gain money. Let's say that the spell works, they come into a load of money, but what they've done is they've hacked the system to get it. Now, one thing that concerns me about witchcraft is that you might get what you want, but you don't really have control over how you get it. What if the way that you gain that money is that a family member dies and you receive a huge inheritance? I know that's a really dark concept, but I've heard some crazy stories. If you actually think about it, there are many ways to obtain money whereby in some cases you'd look at it and you'd think it wasn't really worth it, because in return you've had to sacrifice something that is actually more valuable. And it's been out of your control and against your will because you're utilising witchcraft. Now, when it comes to manifestation, because you're utilising your mind, and if you have a connection with God, I believe that you have the protection of God. God will only give you something if you are ready to receive it. And what some people may also notice is that when you try to manifest something, say for example you're trying to manifest £100,000, if you put yourself in the place where you're envisaging how it would literally feel if you had £100,000 in your bank account right now. This may not be for everybody, but some people might notice that there's a little bit of an uneasy feeling about it. Feelings might come up, like maybe you might feel a little bit of guilt for having that amount of money in your bank account. What if you suddenly feel fearful that you might get robbed? Have you got the security in place and the protection if you did suddenly have a large amount of money? Some people also have this mindset that they subconsciously feel like when they've got money in their bank account, they have this strange urge to spend it, almost as if they want to get rid of it. Now I know that sounds really bizarre, but I have met people like this, especially young people that start working. So many times they have this mentality that they get paid every month and they've got to find things to spend the money on, which if you look at it now, you think that that's insanity. But I do believe that that mentality is led by subconscious programming. And what I believe happens when you try to manifest something is that all of those mental blocks that you have that are repelling that thing, you start to learn to deal with them all. You learn to identify those blocks, get rid of them, and eventually you'll have a clear pathway to whatever that thing is that you want. And when you get it, you'll be able to sustain it and handle it. But that's the difference between doing a marathon and a sprint. It might take a bit longer, but slow and steady wins the race. So that was a complete tangent. There are so many things that I could say about fake spirituality, but I think you guys get the gist. Thank you to everyone who donates to this channel. Thank you for liking, sharing, commenting and subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video. Love you, bye!